It's almost universal, whether it's 2 wheels, 4 wheels, 18 wheels, no wheels. So many of us have a special memory involving a vehicle or a story about a car we've loved. Even if you can't tell a crankshaft from a drive shaft, I want to hear the story of the vehicle that moved you. I'm Blake Jackson, and this is Auto-Biography. Well, our next guest on the Auto-Biography podcast, Kim Berly. He's drummer, vocalist, songwriter for the Stampeders and for the Kim Berly Group, the man behind songs you know by heart and love. And through the pandemic, Kim was keeping our spirits up, posting videos and playing tunes and telling tales. Found out he's an amazing storyteller, so I wanted him on the podcast. Kim Berly, thank you very much for joining us.
Oh, it's a pleasure.
So, Kim, tell us about the vehicle that moved you.
All right. So this was a very, very significant car in not just my life, but in the life of the Stampeders and the transition of the band from kind of a local Calgary band to a band that was going to have some records and become well known. And we knew we had a manager by the name of Mel Shaw in Calgary. And the band, when we were in Calgary, this was 1966. I'm not yet 18 years old. Ronnie and Rich are 18, almost 19. And then there were 3 other guys that were in their mid-20s in the band. A manager, his wife, and his 2 young children, maybe a year and a half and 3 or something. And all of these people had to get from Calgary to Toronto, where we were planning to start our new life. So we went looking for a vehicle, and Mel found a 1957 Cadillac limousine.
Going to pause for a sec and tell you about the 1957 Cadillac Fleetwood limo, officially the Cadillac Fleetwood Series 75 limo. Only 1,010 built, the limo had a base price of $7,348, or $109,485 in today's dollars. Powered by a 365 cubic inch dual 4-barrel 300 horsepower engine, the Fleetwood limo boasted the then space age options like power windows, power mirrors, power steering, polarized sun visors, electric antenna, mirror and matching leather notebook, lambskin carpeting, automatic power memory seats, atomizer with Lanvin perfume, signal-seeking twin-speaker radio, and the Autotronic Eye, or automatic headlight dimmer.
And they told us that it had been owned by Imperial Oil, but the interior was deep purple. So, we knew this, but we didn't care. It was a Cadillac. It was air-conditioned. And we thought, oh, cool. It's got these big stud winter tires on it. And this is in June. So we get this car just a week or 10 days before we were planning to leave Calgary. Mm-hmm. And so the itinerary went like this. And what we had gotten was an agent had come west and had decided to book the band for the summertime in Ontario. So we were going to Toronto to start, and then we would play all these other Ontario gigs for the summer and then supposedly go home. But we had no intention of ever going back, at least not as we could see. Calgary was a roll up the street at 6 p.m. on a Friday evening back in the 60s. And there were no professional musicians. I didn't know anybody who was that. So here we are. We're trying to make it to Toronto and start a whole new life there. That's why the manager's wife and kids and everybody were along. And so we got this car, and it was a black, dark purple interior. I had the dividing glass window that went up and isolated the driver's seat. Oh, wow. And had these air conditioning vents in the ceiling. And we thought, oh, this is luxury. We're going to have air conditioning, because none of us had ever had a car with such a luxury. Yeah. And none of us really had ever had a car except my older brother. So anyway, we head out from Calgary. We get a U-Haul trailer. We put everything we can in the trailer, the band equipment, all our personal belongings. And so basically 8 adults and 2 little children are going to travel to Ontario in this 1957 Cadillac limousine. And our first the trip was to be like this. We were to go to Lethbridge. We were going to play, which is an hour and a half from Calgary.
Yeah.
And we were going to play a night there, earn some gas money because we had no money. Earn some gas money, and then we were going to go to Saskatoon, where we had another couple of gigs. Pick up a bit more dough, and then we were going to make it all the way to. We had a gig in Saskatoon on Friday night. And we were going, or maybe it was Friday and Saturday night, and we were going to then get in the car and drive to North Bay, Ontario, where we had a gig in a bar starting Monday night. So on the trip to Lethbridge is all right. The car is great. We think it's wonderful. It's smelling a little exhaust in the back seat, but we think, what the hell? And we do the gig, we get gas money. And then the next day, now this is at the end of June. It's summer. It's hot. And so we're heading up to, the 6 or 7 hour drive from Lethbridge to Saskatoon. And we realize that the car is just filling up with exhaust fumes. We don't know what's happening. And so the manager puts the glass up so him and his wife and family don't suffocate. And we're making this drive with our heads hanging out the window and ferocious headaches. Yeah. And so we get to Saskatoon, and we tear the back seat out of the car. And of course the wheel wells are rusted right out. Like there's a 2-inch gap about 18 inches long in each wheel well. Yeah. And there's a hole in the muffler. So or a hole in the tailpipe. So this gas is coming, exhaust is coming out of this hole. And we got winter stud tires on in June, and these things are acting like just a windmill, and they're just forcing all this exhaust right up into the back seat, where we were dying from this. We don't know what to do. We have, we can't take it in. We can't have it fixed. We got a couple of days of where we have to play, and then head out. So we got dug in our suitcases, got rags, old T-shirts, old socks, whatever we could find, and we stuffed it in because it's all rusted and jagged. We stuffed it into the wheel wells, and did the gig, loaded up the car. All of our, we had band outfits. We had tie-dye denim jeans, light-colored denim jeans, like purple and pink and yellow and colors like this to make outfits for the band. And we had black shirts, and we hung up all these black shirts, put them in a garbage bag, and on them in the trailer in the U-Haul. And at 1 a.m, we leave Saskatoon heading for North Bay, Ontario. The exhaust was a little better. The patch up helped, but I mean, we're losing brain cells by the millions as we go along here. Yeah. The manager drives the whole way, and we do it. We basically do it nonstop. We'd stop to eat and, use the can. Yeah. And other than that, we motored from Saskatoon to North Bay, Ontario. Now we're getting close, and we're driving through the day on Monday, and we're in Ontario by like Saturday night, but we have no concept of how big Ontario is because we'd been, we cruised through Saskatchewan, Manitoba, nothing to it. We thought we'd be there in no time. Yeah. Well, Ontario is a whole other deal. And so we chugged along on this thing. Nobody slept. We haven't slept for a couple of days. It's Monday. We're driving in Ontario, past Sudbury, on the way to North Bay. We're going to arrive right about 9 o'clock, we figure. So we, call the club owner, tell him we're coming. Don't get anybody else in there. And so right about, I don't know, an hour, 45 minutes away from North Bay, this gigantic thunderstorm blows up, an Ontario summer thunderstorm. And we weren't used to ready for Ontario with the humidity and everything. So this thunderstorm is blowing up, the rain is pouring down, and the back seat starts to fill up with water. Oh no! Because of course the junk we put in the wheel wells is not holding the water out, and these winter tires are windmilling water in there. And literally, we got old coffee cups, whatever we had, and those of us in the back seat literally were bailing out the car as we drove for our gig in North Bay. And we got there. We never got together enough money to get those wheel wells fixed, but we went and got some, like roofing goo and stuff like that,
Oh,
and did our best
yeah.
to stop the flood. But we didn't get a new muffler. We didn't get the tailpipe fixed. Nothing. We never could get rid of those tires. Although, it's amazing that they didn't just fall apart with the studs and everything in Ontario summer heat. But that car got us from Calgary to North Bay, and then we went back to Sault Ste. Marie for another week, and then we finally came down the pike to Toronto on a hot summer night. And we're all these people from the West where there's nothing but space.
Yeah.
And we got into cottage country on Highway 400 coming down on a Sunday night. We were heading into Toronto, and we, when it's your first major traffic jam, like, it's wonderful. You go, wow, I'm in the big city. We're stopped. Yeah. And, people would get out of their cars and walk along, or you walk along beside your car if you wanted some exercise. It took hours to hit the city, but then the highway opened up into a big mega lane thing like we'd never seen. And we were in Toronto, where, that's what we started our career at that point. And that car served us well until about the next February. And I mean, we were tripping. We got an agent in Ottawa, so we're going from Ottawa to Toronto, and various towns in Southern Ontario, a few gigs in the city, and it got us to one last trip to Ottawa. I think it was winter. I think it was probably in February. Mm-hmm. And we didn't have a hotel, and we didn't have we had a gig that didn't have accommodation. So we phoned up hotels, and nobody would have us. And so we phoned up. Oh, I can't remember a grand old hotel, but at the time even it was getting pretty seedy in Ottawa. But it had a nice drive up. You drive the car, and there would be a concierge guy there to take it, to park it or whatever. So here we are driving this old Cadillac with a great big U-Haul trailer behind it. And we pull into this place, and they refuse us. They say, no, we have no rooms. So we go back out to get in the car, and we notice that the front left tire, not the tire, the entire wheel had broken off, and it was laying there sideways on the ground.
Oh, no.
So we went back in the hotel and said, well, we can't leave, so find us some rooms, So they did. They found us some rooms, and that was basically, it was towed away. And I think we took the train back to Toronto and went looking for another car. But that was we called it Old Smoker because we never did get it fixed, and it always the back of the car was always exhausty, and so it's the most memorable car of my life, and it made a huge difference, because by what other vehicle could we possibly have gotten that would take that many people? I mean, this thing, there were 6 grown men in there. Well, I was small, 2 jump seats that faced backwards, and a big bench seat, and I always had a jump seat, being the smallest. So and not comfortable for long trips at all, these little jump seats. Yeah. But we lived in that car. We drove back and forth all over Ontario in it. We sucked up huge amounts of exhaust fumes, and and none of us are completely senile as yet. So it's amazing.
You sound happy and healthy, and I think you're lucky to be alive. I've been in vehicles like that. I've been in tractors like that, and it's
tractors. Yeah.
How did the air conditioning hold up? Because you think 1957, air conditioning was science fiction.
That was a luxury item.
Yeah.
Well, it did, but the problem was that, like everything else in the car, it was recycling the exhaust fumes. So, I mean, we ended up not using the air conditioning very much because it just made us feel worse. So, all of those. So our first great Cadillac experience was. Well, it was great and terrible all at the same time. I mean, it got us where we needed to go.
The glamorous life of the touring musician.
Yeah. We drove away one night. We didn't have the manager and his wife and kids by that point. The band was, so there were 6 guys in this. There's much more room. I was still always in a jump seat, but but we were driving back from somewhere. We used to finish in Ottawa at 2 o'clock in the morning on Saturday, and load up and get in the car and drive to Toronto. So we'd be in Toronto at 8:39 in the morning, and so it was one of those late night long hauls. And we stopped for gas, I don't know, an hour outside of Toronto, and the guy who was driving didn't realize that the attendant had not taken the the pump out of the car, and we drove away, and we took the end of the pump with us, and we didn't know. We drove for miles and miles before. What's that noise? It was this hose banging along the ground.
My God.
So yeah. Wonderful times to look back on. But yeah, that was the story of that car, and I'll remember it more than any other car ever.
That's awesome. That's fantastic. So, once things really started rolling for the band, and success was coming for you, was there an automobile that you picked up once there was more money?
No, because we really liked the idea. When if we were going any distance, we liked to fly and just rent cars, and that's what we did. So we had a circulating cars. We used all kinds of vehicles. That was before the minivan. When the band got back together in the 90s, it was facilitated by minivans, which were wonderful for touring bands. We still do that to this day. The three of us show up at the nearest major airport to wherever we're going, and we've rented a minivan. We carry a couple of guitars, or our 3-4 instruments with us, and I take some drumsticks, and that's all we have. And so minivans are perfect.
Yeah, and the mufflers are usually intact.
Usually, yeah. We haven't run into any serious issues. We did rent a van though, and we had a gig in Faro in the Yukon, which is about 4 hours or so out of Whitehorse, and it was in the summertime. You only go to the Yukon in summer if you have any sense. And we did discover, this shows you to look at the tires, whatever, when you rent a van. We drove all the way back into Whitehorse, and we had basically stopped at a truck stop restaurant to get some breakfast, and we came back out, and we had a flat tire. The tire was completely bald. There wasn't a single hint of tread on it. And it was a rental, so when in Whitehorse, kick your tires.
Yeah, good advice from a traveling musician for sure. And through all the years, I mean, you said 1966 was when you really hit the road with the Stampeders.
Yeah,
you must have seen a lot of miles and a lot of road and a lot of crazy things, especially finishing gigs 2, 3, 4 in the morning. What's the craziest thing you've seen out on the road?
That's a hard one. I don't know, like spooky things, like driving down from northern Quebec to Toronto, and leaving at night, and in the early morning, maybe 6 o'clock in the morning, when the sun's just up and things are getting bright, and we're heading south, and on the other side of the road, there's a body face down in the gravel. So we wheel around and get out of the van, and it's an old man, and he's bleeding from the mouth, and he's face down in the gravel, but he's conscious. And so we're just kind of helping him to his feet, and we're going to get him in the van and take him down the road to the nearest police station, sort of thing.
Yeah. And
we're just doing this, and we got him up on his feet, and all of a sudden this dark blue car comes roaring down the road, slams on the brakes, pulls a U-ey, pulls in behind the truck, and a woman, a nurse in a nurse's outfit, all white, gets out of the car, comes up. Albert, oh God, he's done it again. He wandered away. He's always trying to get home. She takes him, gets him in the car, and drives away. But he had walked like miles from this home that he was in, and heading home. These guys, that's something he does regularly.
Jeez. Well,
or did.
Yeah. Well, good on you for stopping.
Oh God, yeah. You can't. We've also stopped for. I've passed an overturned car in the ditch with the interior lights on. Yeah. And nobody in it, but it was eerie going up to that. And there have been like horrible things, crashes that we've come upon as well, which that's not fun for a podcast.
Yeah, certainly. But no, it's not glamorous being out there and traveling like crazy, but I do wish that I'd seen more of the country like you. So that's pretty cool.
Well, truly, the travel is a wonderful thing. Good to be able to fly to your major centers though, and then get in a car, because that wasn't always that way. For various reasons, I've done the country back and forth a couple of times on wheels, and it is a very spacious nation.
Yeah.
To say the least.
So if you are going to hit the road these days and even take a trip down to the store, what's on the radio for you?
What's on the radio?
Yeah.
Well, my wife always has Sirius FM, and she's always either listening to the 60s or the 70s.
Yeah.
And so sometimes I listen to them, and I like to graze. You get the decades: the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, the 2000s. And I'm more partial when I'm in the car by myself, just to poking through the different decades, because not only for the music, but also for the amazing changes in the technology and the sound of records. Right? It's every decade had its sound or had its progress. The 70s, there was so much technological progress, that from the beginning to the end of the 70s, the sound of recorded music made a huge leap forward. And the 80s was all the new tech, so you got kind of that was the first use of looping and all that kind of thing in recording. So that was that sound. Yeah. And the 90s kind of came back to the 70s and gave us really good 70s sound. and so on. So it's but as far as I got a really, really wide range of music that I like to listen to. I love I love melodic jazz. The really fast jazz is a little much for me sometimes, but I love listening to amazing musicians playing the most complex music that we kind of have available to us these days. And then I like a country song, and it just there's no kind of music that I don't like to listen to.
Yeah, if it's good, it's good.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
and even if it's bad, it's sometimes fun.
Sometimes loud is okay too.
Sure thing. You got it.
Right on. Well, this is perfect, and I'm grateful for your time.
It's a pleasure.
I've been listening to the Stampeders since I knew who they were. If you grew up in Canada and you were anywhere near an AM radio, they're part of the soundtrack to your life. So Kim Berly, the voice behind "Oh My Lady" and Minstrel Gypsy and Wild Eyes, and just a heck of a storyteller. So glad he could make it and tell us about that disastrous 1957 Cadillac limo. Whenever I see a Cadillac from now on, with apologies, I'm going to smell exhaust. Heck of a story. Thanks again. And watch for them on tour. If you've never seen the Stampeders, amazing band to see live. Amazing band in any case. Thank you very much. I'm Blake Jackson. This is the Auto-Biography podcast. Make sure and subscribe and share and tell a friend. And if you have a story about the vehicle that moved you, I would love to know. And it's time for our next story. All right, next guest on the Auto-Biography podcast. Found this gentleman in Nevada, of all places, on Instagram, and I couldn't be happier about it. The handle is Dick's Diesel Garage, and the man behind it is Cord Higbee, and he is a heavy equipment repairman. He describes what he does as fixing all things forgotten, bringing old things back to life, the old things that built America. So, Cord Higbee, thanks for being on the podcast. Tell us about the vehicle that moved you.
Yeah. Hey, thanks for having me. Thanks for the invite. Yeah, I'm super glad to share. One of the vehicles that I've been working on previously that moves me the most is probably my 1934 Diamond T.
Going to pause for a sec and tell you about the 1934 Diamond T. Founded in Chicago in 1905 by a shoemaker named C.A. Tilt. Starting with cars, they became known for their trucks. During World War II, Diamond T moved into making tank transports for the British when its trucks were extensively used to rescue stranded tanks in North Africa. After the war, they went back to civilian models, again featuring the sled dog hood ornament. Diamond T's run came to an end when they merged with REO Motor Company, REO Speedwagon, the company that made that one, to become the Diamond Rio Truck Company.
Because during the war effort, a lot of things that were made before World War II, they got crushed and salvaged to support the war effort. And so something like this is not something you stumble across every day. This one in particular is a 3-man cab. You actually had to pull up the seat cushion that you sit on to put fuel in it. So if you can imagine that, there's not even a filler cap on the exterior of the cab. I imagine it got a little stinky in there.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, just things that about it that we just don't see today. For instance, the Mercury fuel gauge. You know, and I think a lot of us don't give the old timers the credit they deserve. This fuel gauge works off of specific gravity. The mercury in the gauge is acted upon by a capillary tube. This tube is still intact. I kind of traced it out because I myself wasn't entirely sure how it worked. Traced it all out. This tube goes down the firewall underneath the floorboard and to the tank. Depending on how much fuel is in that tank, the gravity of the fuel itself acts upon the tube, you know, forcing the gas one way or another, and voila, the mercury in your gauge up in the dash moves up and down. And that, to me, that is incredible. What man sat down and figured out how big the tank was to say, all right, well, if it's going to be full, and you know, and somebody sat down and figured all that out. I mean, because this is 1934. They didn't really have like an accurate fuel gauge. Most gauges you get out and you just look inside of it. Oh, okay, this is how much gas we got. I mean, things like that just move me about these old vehicles, you know, and it's just fascinating to me. Every one of them has a story, you know, and this one is especially special to me because when I was a little kid, I was really good friends with this old man and his stepson. We played together a lot in this old yard, not too far from my house. And that's where this old truck was sitting. And from that day on, I thought, man, that is a really neat old truck. And I just remember playing in it, you know, you pretend like you're driving it and stuff. And I noticed this shiny little tag on the floor, and it said Diamond T, and there were some numbers. I'm like, wow, this looks really important. I should put this right here under the seat so it doesn't get lost, you know. And anyway, years later, I mean, we're talking 15 years. The old man died, and his kid is his stepson, so good friends with him today. He said, hey, Cord, I'm selling some of this old stuff. It belonged to my dad. He said, got to come take a look at some of it. All right, so I get up there, and I said, man, would you sell me that old Diamond T? Like, never thought he would go for it, you know. And he's like, well, yeah, absolutely. And so we made a deal on it. I couldn't believe it. Anyway, I'm over there looking, and it hit me. I'm like, man, I wonder if that tag is still under that seat. So I reached right under there, and I pulled it right out. It'd been sitting there waiting for me that whole time.
Nice.
And then it wasn't a week later, my wife, she come and helped me. We aired up the tires, and we ended up pulling it home, and I've been working on it ever since. I had to find the doors for it. They were infamous for having the doors missing because the plates that supported the door hinge assembly would rot. They're made of wood, and so the doors would just fall off. And if they weren't literally tied on somewhere, they were just set somewhere and never. It ended up being discarded more than like. But anyway, I've got some good friends in the car world now, and they I reached out to all of them, and all of us, it took us 3 years, or a better part of 3 years, and we found 2 doors, passenger and driver side. We found 2 of them, and they were actually in pretty good shape. Actually, they matched the patina pretty well on it. But yeah, that's probably one of my more fond vehicles that I've been really had. I mean, I got a couple other ones, but that one's probably my favorite.
And if you're looking for parts for a Diamond T, and I'm going to be honest, I haven't heard of Diamond T before. And the longer I do this podcast, the longer I'm learning about vehicles like the REO Speedwagon.
Yes, yes.
So many vehicles that were innovative in their day, but just for whatever reason, they couldn't make it. If you do need parts for this Diamond T, is there a place you can look? Is anyone doing reproduction parts, or is it a scavenger hunt?
There is a really good friend of mine down in Texas. He runs and operates what's called, and he's on Instagram, it's called the Diamond T Rubber Company. He was one of the first guys that I really ran into that knew a lot about him. In fact, I gave him the numbers off my vehicle. That's just his thing. Every time he runs into somebody who actually has one, he'll write the VIN number down, because he's always trying to figure out the date of origin or when the vehicle was born, compared to however many are still left out there. So he was very helpful. But as far as like straight up going shopping, say I needed a left-hand fender, it's nearly impossible to find. Now, the best place that I've found yet that has a selection of these kind of parts is in Australia. I'm not lying, in Australia.
Why Australia, do you think?
Well, you see, about the time the Great Depression was going on, a lot of these manufacturing companies, this is why you haven't heard of many of them, because they started to go out of business. People weren't buying cars during the Great Depression. Nobody had any money. Nobody had anything. So these manufacturers were doing everything they could to sell vehicles anywhere. And they shipped so many. And Mack trucks, old Mack trucks, the B model Macks, a ton of them went over there. Those people needed trucks that could handle that down under, that country out there. I mean, thousands of miles and never see anybody. And so there's actually a lot of Diamond T's over there. There's a lot of B model Mack trucks. There's a lot of those older, like Packards, a lot of that stuff that made it over there that it didn't survive over here.
Yeah, Packard, that's another one.
Mm-hmm.
As an aside, do you know if they had to be converted to a right-hand drive?
So these trucks were made, they only made one cab. And if you look, you can see where it had the right-hand drive option. You can look real close and you can see where all they had to do is literally unbolt the steering gear and move it to the other side of the vehicle. The frame, the holes are in the frame, and there's like a metal pop out that you could hit with. It looks like you could just hit it with a hammer and poke the steering column through and go to town. Honestly, it was they couldn't afford to build 2 different chassis. Yeah. It was one chassis. Okay, where's it going? All right, the steering wheel needs to be on this side of the truck. It's amazing. That kind of stuff just really fascinates me.
I've always been fascinated by, as you mentioned before, the Mercury fuel gauge, which they were dealing with slide rulers back then, and just a lot of ingenuity. Any sort of way that they were able to make things work without the technology we have. What other sort of innovations have you seen on vehicles? Any sort of vehicle that echoes that?
Let me give you a foundation here. So everything that we run off of, and if it's a vehicle, it's on wheels, it moves down the road, it takes AC power and it converts it to DC. That's what the alternator does, right? Through the diode trio. All of our vehicles are negatively grounded. Okay, so the electrons pass from positive to negative. All right. So that's why the positive cables always rust and corrode, and everything that has it that's on the positive side of the circuit is prone to getting oxidation, and it gets, especially if the weather is really bad, right? So anything before about 50, I'm going to say anything before about 1950, all of it was negatively. I'm sorry. I mean, it's confusing. Positively grounded, and a lot of it was 6-volt. And I think it was a big step. We needed to go 12-volt eventually. It needed to happen just for amperage reasons and things like that. Like their starters, they really sucked, but all the electrical systems were positively grounded. And because they did that, now the electrons were forced to go the other direction, and your electrical system lasted a long time. Nothing corroded because it was all on the other side of the circuit. That's one thing that I wish we'd have never gone away from. I don't know why they decided to do that. You know, I'm sure it had something to do with money. But that's one thing that was very innovative, because they knew that's why they did it. They knew that because the electrons go the other direction, because you wired your vehicle this way, your wiring and everything is going to last longer because it doesn't get the corrosion. That's one thing that I can probably really harp on as far as being innovative, something we've moved away from, probably.
You know, I'd never heard that before. And actually, while I have you on the phone, this might be handy. My truck has a generator instead of an alternator. And even for my own purposes, what's the difference?
Yeah. Okay, so a generator, it has what we call a field. It's called a field coil. So a generator, as long as it has, I don't know what to call it. So if a generator sits too long, you have to arc across the terminal, arc across the field coil. That's what it's called. You have to arc across the field coil to energize it. And it's got some kind of a small capacitor in it. And it can discharge over time. The main difference between a generator and an alternator is that a generator, you can spin it forward or backwards, and you're going to get voltage out of it no matter what. You don't have to meet a specific RPM or anything like that. You're going to get voltage, and it's straight voltage. Doesn't need to be converted. Whereas an alternator, they're taking AC and they're stepping it through a diode trio to DC. Generators is straight DC.
Okay.
And they worked really good, and they lasted a long time, a really long time. Like, you can go pull a generator out of one of these old trucks, literally take a fan blade and a shaft or something and put it in a ditch and charge a battery. Like, even put an impeller up in the sky and let the wind blow on it and somehow, rig it up so it turns it. You're going to get power. It's that simple.
If you were to win the lottery or something like that, what would your dream vehicle be?
Let's say it was late 30s.
Yeah.
The World War II hadn't started yet, and I had some money in my pocket. I would take a cab or transportation, whatever it was, right down to Ford Lincoln Mercury, and I would buy a 1937 Lincoln Zephyr.
Ooh.
I would buy the two-door coupe is what I would buy with the V12 engine. They were a beautiful car.
Hot Rod Lincoln.
And for its day, it was It was the king of the road. It had a lot of amenities. Namely, I believe that particular car had air conditioning, which was unheard of in that day and age. Unheard of, air conditioning in a car.
Space age.
I mean, yeah. I mean, it was a rich man car. I mean, no one. It'd be like me today going down to, like, say, Ferrari or one of these. That same scenario, it was just not in the realm of possibilities. These people that had these cars, they had lots of money. You know, I think back in the day, the ticket price for one of those cars, fully loaded, as we would call it, I think they left the floor for $4,000 or $5,000 in the 30s, which was a lot of money.
Yeah, when some people were subsisting on relief for years.
Yeah, you know, and back then, it was not uncommon for people to have vehicles that were over 15, 20 years old. I mean, in 37, people were still driving Model Ts because that's all they could afford, and they could fix it.
Well, we're out of time, but Cord, this is perfect. This is exactly why I started the podcast.
Appreciate you having me on your show. I feel like I just talked the whole time, but I think that's what you wanted.
Absolutely it is. There's Cord Higbee calling in from Arizona. His business, Dick's Diesel Garage. Genius. And he's got a passion for those older vehicles, so thank you very much, Cord. And check out Dick's Diesel Garage on Instagram. Always lots to look at there. Thanks for telling us about the 1934 Diamond T. And, of course, thanks to Kim Berly from the Stampeders, Alberta's own classic rock legends. Watch for them on tour. I hope soon. I can't wait to see the Stampeders again. I'm Blake Jackson. Thank you for listening to the Auto-Biography podcast. If you have a story to tell, by all means, let me know. In the meantime, like, share, tell a friend, tell everybody about this. And hey, keep your wheels on the road and a tarp on your load.